everybody. So we're live. We're going to be talking to Anya Reddy, a play therapist. Let me see if I can just add her. Hold on. So we're just connecting. There we go. Hi, Anya.
Hi, Akira. Good evening.
I'm so glad that you could take the time out to join us for this.
Yeah, I'm so excited. Thanks for asking me.
Yeah. So just for our community, so Anya Reddy is a play therapist, and she's been really kind of gracious enough to join us for this conversation and have a bit of a chat with us and tell us a bit more about play therapy. So Anya, welcome. This is our first series of conversations that we've started that we call Indigro Adda. And we've kick-started it with our concept on play and the different forms of play. So it's really, really nice to have you here. So welcome, and the floor is all yours. Why don't you tell us a little bit about yourself? What your journey, what play therapy means, etc.
Okay. Well, I grew up in Chennai, and growing up, I witnessed a lot of bullying amongst my peers and my surroundings and my environment. And I think just being a naturally empathetic and sensitive person, I absorbed that, and I also really wanted to recreate more child friendly and child aware communities. And in working with children, the big bonus is that I also get to interact with a lot of parents and teachers who,
Yeah.
heavily shape a child's life. So I'm not only working with a child, once a week, but I am also working with the adults whom they spend more time with. And play therapy is really, play is a child's natural language, considering they don't have the verbal techniques required to efficiently communicate their feelings and experiences. Play becomes their natural language. So with play therapy, the beauty is it's not only for children, it's also for adults. And
Oh wow.
what's lovely in working with adults using play therapy is that it's a very empathetic, um, very gentle way of returning to the inner child and returning to the inner child to hold it and to heal it. Because if you really trace a lot of things back to why people behave a certain way, it's coming from their childhood, their inner child, whatever their childhood needs weren't met. So it allows the adult to start to reparent themselves, their own inner children.
Okay. So when you talk about your inner child, is that for us, I mean, from in a layman's terms, for people who aren't familiar with the world, would that be basically your early childhood? Is that what it's referred to, your personality? So, can you tell us a little bit more about how your development takes place at an early childhood level?
Okay. Um, those are two just different questions. So I answer
Yeah.
them differently. So the inner
Yeah.
child, I would describe the inner child as, 0 to 17 years, just until you turn
Oh,
18. Those are your
okay.
formative years, although we know
So
that,
it's not only your early childhood. It is 0 to
no,
17.
yes, yes. So
Okay.
what we do know is that the brain um, fully matures at the age of 25,
Okay.
and that after that you can work and to form new neural pathways, but that's when
Okay.
your brain has fully matured, when you're 25. So when I talk about the inner child, yeah, the what interests me is that parents give away their child's toys. There's a lot
Yeah.
of, if an adult wanted to watch a Disney movie, it would be like, oh my god, grow up. You're still a child, things like that. But it's very important that we remember that I was, if I was 24 last year, the person whom I was last year is still part of who I am today.
Yeah.
And your child self is a big part of who you are today. And
Yeah.
it's just sort of holding that.
Yeah.
Well, so your second question was about early child development.
Yes. Yes.
What in specific would you like to know?
So I wanted to understand in terms of, so when we talk about play in specific, right, and we talk about how, all around development that takes place through play, especially through early childhood. And there are so many, I mean, as you were saying, so the early childhood is part of your inner child, and as your personality develops and things like that. So what are the elements that come into it when we talk about play? What are the factors that come into the development of a child during the early childhood period?
Okay, so I was reading something and it said, I think it was a parent who said, how much play does my child need? And
Yeah.
the response was, think of play as a prescription from a doctor. You need play every single day, and that should be your attitude towards play.
Yeah.
And there's two kinds of play that I think are very important. There's
Yeah.
unstructured play or free play, and then there is structured play. So they're both really important for two different reasons, many different reasons. So
Yeah.
structured play is, your more sports, um, games with rules, board games.
Yeah.
And that's important because it helps with, learning how to play socially, how to share, taking
Yeah.
turns, how to win graciously, how to lose graciously, things like that, bargaining, all of that. And free play or unstructured play is so important because your child is learning creativity, imagination, thinking skills, problem solving skills. Like I've been part of several workshops where adults have talked about, how back then they didn't have certain toys. So, if they wanted a teacup but they didn't have a teacup to play with, they would pretend that the top of the toothpaste tube was their teacup.
Yeah.
So all of this imaginative play, it's so deeply important to ensuring that your child is happy, is actually releasing dopamine and happy neurons and chemicals in their brain that have such a deep impact on how the brain develops. But
Yeah.
it's also, free play is just important in terms of when a parent is present. So, and when I talk about a parent being present, I don't mean just being physically present and, on the cell phone, although I do understand the temptation. So I'm not
Yeah.
judging any parent. It's just a
Yeah.
practice that I think takes time.
Yeah.
But I do mean, being mentally present, being actively engaged.
I
So you
think
are
there's a
with
bit of a
your child
lag
while
in
your
the.
child is playing, and what's important in free play is to allow the child to direct the play.
Yeah.
So I've invited parents and children, to play together. I have one of my tools is a sand tray with lots of miniatures. And I did this workshop where I invited parents and children to play. And it was so interesting, watching some parents just completely take over the sand tray. So what started as
Yes.
a child sand tray, and that's our view of what the world should look like. But what's so interesting again about play is since it's their language, they are expressing what they have witnessed. They are also learning about the environment in which they live. When a child is playing, they're really processing everything they've experienced. So coming back to my
Yeah.
example, I would talk to the parents about how when a child is playing, it's their playground. It's the only space where they get to set the rules. It's the only space
Yeah.
where they can be fully autonomous, primarily because play is safe. So when
Yeah.
a parent is allowing their child to play, my only thing is, just place the least number of restrictions possible. As long as your child is safe, it's okay.
Yeah.
And
So,
just
I just had one question. As a parent, so when my child is playing, or whether it's free play, I mean, so it's obviously two different things. One, whether it's free play or whether it's structured play. What are what are the factors that I should keep in mind, or what are the things that I should be aware of, as a parent? Because a lot of the times what happens is that, we don't really know how often to step in, how when to step back, at what point do I guide the play, at what point do I lead the play in a particular direction. How should we kind of what basically be aware of, what are the things that we need to be talking about or being aware of when our child is playing?
That's a really good question. So, when a child's playing, really, it's coming back to, allowing them to direct the play. So, one of my biggest recommendations to parents who are playing with their children is first be completely present mentally
Yeah.
and just watch your child playing and then wait for them to invite you into their play. Because when you
Okay.
do that,
Yeah.
you're respecting their space. You're
Yeah.
also giving them the power to make decisions. You're respecting their autonomy. And more than respecting their autonomy, you're encouraging it. You're teaching them that they can ask for things and that when they ask for something, it will be respected. So that's consent, which is a huge thing that we need to teach more,
Yeah.
especially to our children.
Absolutely. Absolutely. Yeah.
Yeah. So there is, to begin with, yes, waiting for the child to invite you in. And then next, when the child does invite a parent in, ask, as the parent, how would you like me to play? So
Yeah.
again, you're encouraging imagination, more cognitive thinking. You're encouraging autonomy further.
Yeah. Okay. So if I were to sum it up, it would be to wait for them to kind of come, ask you to join them, right?
Yes, and definitely the don'ts are very clear. Do not judge their play. Do not
Yeah.
criticize their play. Do not control their play. So if a
Yeah.
child wants to put a book on top of a bottle, just let them put the book on top of the bottle.
Yeah. So, and this is the hard thing, right? This as a I mean, for all of us, just to hold ourselves back, because we all have that need for things to be done a certain way. There's that sense of control that you want to have over a situation. So for example, if your child is coloring an apple purple, you'll be like, no, 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 it's not purple, it's green or red, and you want to kind of like make it more real and make it more appropriate,
Right.
and so we kind of project our own experiences onto our children.
Yeah. And I think we forget that, even in terms of how a child learns to play in a developmental manner, if you look at how they learn to play, it's really, for them, absolutely everything is new. They themselves, their
Yeah.
existence, every second is absolutely new. So when a child is playing and they're making mistakes, what we see as mistakes is the child learning. If the if
Yeah.
the book falls off of the bottle, that's how they're learning. Okay, the book cannot sit on a bottle, but okay, the book
Yeah.
can sit on a bed without falling. It's just how they're learning.
So, when it comes to like social skills and things like that, as they're learning how to play, because there are obviously different forms of play. There's play where you're kind of playing by yourself, and then as you start to kind of engage, especially at an early childhood level, you're building your social skills. And I think that sometimes there's a bit of a pressure that we place on ourselves again as parents, because you want. Especially within a social construct, especially when there are family members who have a problem, etc. How do we kind of, you know, uh, be sure that it's okay for them to play on their own, not to kind of force them into situations to play with somebody because of societal pressures, so to speak?
Um, so really, for a child to be social at any age, when you really boil it down, it depends a lot about their attachment with their parents. So what we know is that if a child who has a healthy relationship with their parents watches their parents engaging with adult or child, that the parent approves of this other person, then the child is more likely to be warm towards this new person.
Yeah.
That being said, it's not necessary that the child is going to play with these adults anyway, or children. So I think, it's just really important for parents to be okay with wherever their child is at. There are, I think, cooperative play starts 6 and above, and it progresses from there further. But for some children it
Yeah.
might just happen later. It could just be because they are more emotionally sensitive. They just need a little bit more time to warm up to being okay with sharing space with another child. But it could also just be because of their relationship with their parents. It could be because of something difficult that happened emotionally early on in their life that makes it harder for them to trust someone else. But honestly, I mean, if it's not okay for someone, for a child, or for anybody, I don't think that we should be pushing someone into doing something that is difficult for them.
Yeah. So I think it basically comes back to that question of respecting the child's individual wishes, right? And asking for consent. And, the child's consent is extremely important
For
in
both,
all of
just
this.
respecting the child's dignity.
Yeah. Yeah. So we had one question that came up as we were talking. So somebody wanted to know, like when we say that parents kind of, just hold back and let your child play and things like that. At what point, do we step in if the child is starting to get bored or frustrated? How do we know? How do we manage that? Because at some point, because we know that children have low attention spans, etc. They're getting hassled with a particular task or something like that. So at what point do we switch activities?
I would actually highly recommend not switching activities. And I'll tell
Oh,
you
really?
why.
Okay.
It's because yeah, because when we allow a child to get bored, instead of buying 100 different toys, instead of constantly managing their time, when we allow a child to get bored, they sit in that frustration or that boredom for maybe 5 to 10 minutes, and then they start to really use their creative skills. Okay, now, and because
Yeah.
it's now they're bored, they have a problem, so they're using their creativity, they're using their problem thinking skills, and they have an issue that they are highly capable of solving for themselves. And by not jumping in and solving it for them, we allow them to solve it for themselves. So we are really raising more capable children, more self-reliant
Yeah.
children. And also,
Yeah.
honestly, I don't recommend buying children 100 different toys, because all it ever does is it reduces their ability to play properly. I mean, honestly, if any parent does that, you'll see that the child really just plays with 10 of those toys. But
Yeah.
what's
So
also
you'd
really
rather that they
important
kind of
about that?
pick.
Yeah, so I was saying,
Sorry.
what's important about that question also is that it's a chance for the parent also to step back and introspect and where their discomfort is coming from. What is it about the child being bored or frustrated that makes them uncomfortable? Because frustration and boredom are emotions that we all experience in life. And I think as a parent, we want to jump in and rescue them emotionally. But when we do
Yeah.
that, we're not allowing them to experience an emotion. We're saving them from it. We're trying to rescue them from it. And that doesn't do them any favors in the long run. They need to be able to experience frustration, vent it
Yeah.
out. And what's important is for the parent to be there. The parent is present, and the child can come back to the parent and they can work through it together. But allow for that to happen. Allow that dance to
Yeah.
happen.
So the child needs to experience boredom, because without experiencing that boredom, then there's no outlet for creativity. There's no outlet to figure out his own problem solving of how do I fix the situation. Yeah.
Yeah, and also it's really important and healthy for us to just feel our feelings. They are just
Yeah.
feelings. Like at the end of the day, we don't need to be so scared of them.
Yeah. It's not a negative thing to be bored, basically.
Yeah.
Yeah. All right. Okay. There's one more question that propped up. So somebody had a question about how if your child is, insisting that you kind of help them or teach them and saying, Mama, you're not helping me and you're not teaching me and you're not coming and doing this with me or for me. How do I get them to do it on their own and to give them that freedom to kind of explore and experience it for themselves? Because if they want my attention and my company all the time, then I'm not really giving them an opportunity to grow.
Okay, that's interesting. I think if a child needs a parent all the time, it definitely again depends on the age of the child. but that might be at least mild cause for concern. And I would at least recommend a chat with a therapist to see if there is any underlying thing that could be healed, why there is a need for the child to, why the child feels insecure, why the child constantly needs the parent. But I think maybe just, setting a boundary. So what the parent could say is, I hear that you really want me to help you with this, and I'm going to give you 15 minutes for you to try and do it yourself. And after those 15 minutes, I'll come back and check in with you to see how you're doing. And from there, we can work on it together if you still need me. So it's sort of.
But if they're Yeah, but if they're younger, so I mean, at 2.5, 3 years of age, is it natural to kind of expect them to kind of play on themselves? So this is the thing about the ages and stages of play, right? What as parents, sometimes I think that we're not really too sure at what age or what stage we should expect our children to be achieving certain milestones, because and we put a lot of pressure on ourselves, especially today with social media. And you see so many of your friends, and you'll see another 3-year-old or 4-year-old who's doing XYZ things, and then you look at your child and say, okay, so what is the base level in terms of just social skills or attention span or being able to do things at different ages and stages? I think that's where the cause for concern comes from, because at what point do I have to say, okay, this is something that I need to take a little bit more seriously, or whereas this is something that he'll outgrow because it's a stage.
Okay. Akila, I just have to tell you that my internet is a little, you're hanging a bit every now and then, just so that you're aware of that.
Sorry.
But, typically the timeline is from birth to 3 months. The child is involved in what we call unoccupied play, where they're really just moving their limbs around and they're discovering how they can move their limbs. Because like I said, everything is new, so they're discovering their bodies. From birth to about 2 years is solitary play, where the child might be, playing with a mobile, or, just discovering a ball, the texture of the ball, that the ball can be thrown. At 2 years, there's more spectator behavior, where the child is watching. They're not engaging in play. They might watch their mother play, they might watch another child play, but they're not engaging. Along the time of being 2 years and above, there's more parallel play, where they might watch another child play on the side, but they are playing in their own little corner, in their own space. So they're not yet ready to share space. But then by 3 to 4 years, the children are able to share space when they're playing. So, but it's still more the kind of play where you might see them, all playing with this one slide, but they're all doing their own thing. One is standing under the slide, they're building a sandcastle. One is just walking up and down. One is going up and down the slide. So they're not playing together, but they're sharing space. Yeah. And then after that, by around the age of 4 years, you start to see more cooperative play, where the children have interest in the play that they're all playing together, the play activity, and also in each other.
Yeah.
And then by around 6 years and above, you'll start to see children playing structured games, where, they could win, they could lose, there are rules. And this is important because they start to learn social rules, and they're playing out what they know about social rules, what they think is fair and unfair. But what's interesting in this stage also is that children are setting their own rules. They're not yet ready for someone else to set the rules for them in their play.
Yeah. So tell me then, in that scenario, if my child, like you said, wants me to play with him all the time, how do I gently guide him towards starting to play on his own, and to make that transition, say at 3.5 years of age, where, he can start moving into parallel play, for example. Is there something that I can do as a parent to facilitate that process, not to kind of, take it over completely, but just to help him guide, to kind of set up an environment, or to guide him in that direction?
I think what might help is when there is another child playing, for the parent to encourage play between herself and the child in a
Yeah.
parallel manner. And then, sort of doing that regularly, and then also starting to wean the child off the parent. So maybe the parent leaves the child alone for 5 minutes, and then maybe with time starts to leave the child alone for 10 minutes, and
Yeah.
but also telling the child, preparing them
Yeah.
emotionally.
And maybe being in the same environment without actually being part of the play.
Mhm.
That might also
That
help,
would
right?
definitely help also.
Yeah.
It's almost like the parent is a security blanket. So just
Yeah.
having the
Yeah.
parent there might also
Yeah.
help.
Yeah. So there was another question that we had about fathers and this idea of the role that gender plays in parenting, and a lot of the times we see that fathers tend to kind of take on a lot of the physical exercise activities kind of a thing, and how does that kind of influence the play and the development of a child in terms of just the gender stereotypes in the mother versus the father and the kind of activities that they do with their children, and what would you recommend?
So one thing I firmly believe in is that is that a child has one or more parents, not a mother, a father, or anything like that.
So it's
That's
not gender
again a very
based at all. Yeah.
yes,
So you
it's a
have two
very social
parents. Yeah.
concept.
Fair enough.
Absolutely, you have two
That's a good
parents.
distinction to make. Yeah.
Yeah. And I was just reading actually a study by the University of Cambridge where they found that playtime with dads helps a lot with a child's ability to regulate their own emotions, and it helps with their development. So
Yeah.
that's typically also because fathers they found engage in more physical play, like you mentioned, tickling, sports, things like that. I personally also encourage fathers sitting down with their children and playing with dolls or cars or anything like that.
Yeah.
I think it's healthy for children to see their own parents breaking gender stereotypes, because then it doesn't set
Yeah.
those barriers for themselves.
Yeah, fair enough. Okay, so that then brings me to the second part of the question in terms of the role that gender plays in a child's play, in terms of the kind of toys and games that we have. I mean, we walk into any store today and there is very clearly a boys section, there's a girls section, and there's a lot of peer pressure at a very young age. By the time they go to play school, or immediately you have children who will, because of peer pressure, not because of what parents are saying necessarily, but immediately they'll be like, I don't want to play with this because that's for girls, or I don't want to play with this because that's for boys. So how does a parent kind of uh, introduce some sort of gender neutrality when it comes to the toys and the play that they indulge in?
Well, for starters, buy your children dolls and cars.
Yeah.
Or more than that, allow your children also to reach for what they want.
Yeah.
So it's interesting also, I mean, part of it is, buying your children girl toys and boy toys. But what's also interesting is just to see whether your girl does reach for a car or
Yeah.
your boy does want dolls. And more often than not, I've heard and seen, even my brother growing up wanted to play with beads and my dolls and things like that. Um, I think what a parent could do, yeah, is, buying different toys. And also maybe, like I said, have a dad play with the child while he's playing with dolls so as to break that gender stereotype. What more could a parent do? It's difficult because, like you said, the child goes to a preschool, and if the other children are behaving this way, then it becomes confusing. Like, okay, this is how it is at school, and this is how it is at home. So, which do I follow? So, then the parent also has to have conversations with the child and say, but don't you enjoy playing with cars? Okay, so then what's wrong with it? Okay, so maybe she
Yeah.
doesn't like enjoying playing with cars. So, she doesn't have to, but you can.
Yeah. So I think the idea is to continue to have those conversations as and when they crop up. And it's not one of those things that's a one-time conversation. It will happen at
Yeah,
multiple points and to kind of reinforce the same messaging throughout,
yeah,
right?
absolutely.
So the next question that I had was in terms of how does play impact a child's behavior? Because in terms of the kind of play, sometimes you'll see, and again, there are stereotypes to this. You'll see that girls are sitting down and playing quietly, boys are jumping on the sofa, and they tend to say, oh, boys will be boys, girls will be girls. Or we even have parents who say that, oh, I wish I had a girl, or I wish I had a boy, because we're stereotyping the kind of play to the behavior. So, what is your take on that? Do you feel that again gender plays a role in the kind of behavior that you see in play?
Sorry, my internet is hanging. Okay, so stereotyping play. Um, I think that has a lot to do with how we raise our children. If I come into a child's life thinking, okay, you're a girl, so this is how I expect you to play, then we're limiting our child.
Yeah.
Sorry, your question was, how does
How
play
do you feel
impact child's behavior?
Yeah.
Well, I mean, play is, like I said, think of it as a prescription from a doctor. It's so important. There's so much development that's going on. There are brain chemicals that are being pumped, that are so healthy and so important. They're learning social skills. They're learning thinking skills. They're learning how to play out their feelings and experiences. When a child is, because they don't have the words to either write it out or even talk about it like an adult can, play really becomes their language, where they can rebuild experiences. And often in play therapy,
Yeah.
that's what I see. A child comes in and plays out their experiences. You'll see children so often playing out a mean teacher, and then suddenly they become kind because they're playing out what they've seen the mean teacher, and then after that they're playing out how they would have liked it to go. They're playing out the kind teacher. So I don't think play can impact a child's behavior necessarily. I think it would definitely impact a child significantly if the child wasn't getting time to play,
Yeah.
especially free play. Free play, I think, is
Yeah.
actually possibly more important than structured play.
Yeah.
But play directly, if the child is playing, I wouldn't say it impacts their behavior, except for it could definitely make them healthier.
All right. Yeah. And given that we're now in an increasingly digital age, right? And the amount of screen that, children have access to or they see around them. I mean, even the most, well intentioned parent at some point or the other, screen plays a role in your child's life. So how would you classify screen in the context of play?
Well, I was actually just reading a study by Lego Foundation on digital play,
Yeah.
and
Yeah.
they describe screenplay or digital play as play with a laptop and a smartphone, a tablet, or even the TV, a video game. And there were actually, I know that we all have these very negative associations of digital play.
Yeah.
Foundation found so many positives from digital play.
Yeah.
So, I mean,
So I
some of
think
the
it comes down.
positives.
Sorry, continue. Yeah.
So, I mean, yeah, it does come down to, what your child is playing. So, of course, as a parent, you need to have parent lock. You do need to be aware of what your child's playing with. You do need to have a conversation about how to be safe on the internet, what their limitations are. You can also have like a parent lock, I think, or a timer sort of thing, which is possible. But I mean, in terms of positives, the Lego Foundation found that it made children more joyful. They felt a lot happier when they were playing. Sometimes they vented out their frustration for like 10 minutes or so, and then they were just enjoying it, which is what playing a game with the child. So, if video game on the TV or on a cell phone. And that was something that they
Yeah.
heavily encouraged, actually, encouraging parents to join their children in digital play and to not allow it to just be a solo activity. And if it is a solo game, then just talking to their child about their digital playtime. Oh, so what was the game today? What was it like? What do you like about it? Did you win? Did you lose? What happened today? How did it feel? What do you enjoy about it? Just questions like that. Yeah, and also,
Yeah.
I mean, there were so many more positives, but I won't get into it.
Okay. Okay. So on in that context, I have one question about the difference between this idea of quantity versus quality. As parents, when we have such a busy hectic routine, sometimes we're managing more than one child, we're working from home, so play for us to get down and play with our child is not always easy to do. So how do you see quantity versus quality when it comes to playing with your child?
I definitely understand, especially now with COVID, parents are overwhelmed. And I think it's fair to just sit down, put your child on your lap and say, mom's just really tired today. I can play with you for 5 minutes today, but I'm so tired. And I promise I'll try to make more time for us to play tomorrow. And
Yeah.
because
So it's
at the end of the day, play is about a bond, a shared bond between a child and a parent, which is so important in terms of making sure it's secure and healthy. So because that's the basis of their biological and psychological development. So if you can't play with them, it's okay, but
yeah.
it's also just ensuring that they feel loved and held and seen and heard, and there's affection. So if you do still like hug them, hold them, put them on your lap, just give them 5 minutes of attention. A child who's well regulated, who has a healthy attachment with their parents, should typically be fine.
Yeah. So it's about being present in the moment, whatever it is, even if it is for that 5 minutes, be completely and fully there.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, like you said, quality over quantity.
Yeah. All right. And one more question I had in terms of just how do you see, so what Indigrow does in terms of just providing a cultural context to play, whether it's in terms of our books or games and things like that, and, kind of bringing in the cultural context. So how do you feel or how important do you think that is for a child's development in the early years in terms of creating a parallel to what you would like the world that the child that you want them to be exposed to, or the universe that you want them to kind of grow up in? How do you see culture playing a role in play?
I think it's important as long again as you're being mindful about it. And I know Indigrow has a very contemporary approach to play, and I think that's very
Yeah.
important. I think it's also help child to be connected to their roots so that they feel more connected to where they come from. They can sense of cohesion with the community. And also what we know as, what I've heard from a lot of play child development, it has everything. So actually to go back to traditional Indian play techniques is the best idea.
Yeah. All right. I think there's a bit of a lag, not able to
Yeah, it's my internet. It's
hear you.
sorry.
Yeah. That's all right. So that's all the questions that I had at this point in time. For those of you watching, if there's any questions that you have for Anya at this point, or me, we're happy to take them. Do let us know if there's anything that you would like us to kind of talk about when it comes to play or play therapy. There were some really good questions that came up earlier, which I think hopefully we've answered. So we'll just give it a minute and just see if there's anybody out there who has another question. I think the internet's again a little slow on Anya's end. No,
Yeah,
I
I'm
think that's
sorry.
it. That's okay. Thank you so much, Anya. This was really, really wonderful and so informative. Okay, wait, there's a question that's come in. Sorry. What type of play is encouraged during this pandemic and when children are at home? So, again, I think this lockdown has really taken a toll on a lot of the parents. So, how do
And the children
you
as well.
see? Yeah, and the children as well, absolutely. It's not easy. They don't have their friends. They're not, there's no outside fresh air, the kind of physical activity that they're typically used to. None of that is kind of,
Yeah.
coming into place. So, how do you feel that we should kind of compensate? I think that's the question for that.
So what I know is that you're still allowed, at least in Chennai, since we had lockdown and things like that, the strictest measures is that we can only walk 2 kilometers from our house. So I would
Okay.
recommend, taking a cycle, your own cycle, so you're not sanitized and things like that. So encouraging your children to just cycle within the allowed radius. If your child's too young to cycle, then maybe if you can put them in one of those toddler backpack sort of things, you know what I'm talking
Yeah,
about?
yeah,
Yeah, you can
yeah.
strap them in and
Carriers.
take them out for a walk, just helping them get fresh air. But it's really unfortunate that they can't go out and play. I don't know. I think in some societies, your children are in play. They are definitely encouraged. You have, if you can set up play dates with families who live in your area or in your building, and you know that everybody's been safe, then that's a great idea as well. Or maybe they can just, wearing their masks, playing together, but not sharing toys, maybe. And definitely, I mean, it's also a great opportunity for you to continue to play with your child, board games, free play.
Um, I had one question when it comes to, since we're talking about children and how they are being affected by the lockdown and, I mean, obviously there is a certain amount of stress that they can sense in the environment, whether it's the news or, I mean, every day you're sitting and thinking about the number of cases rising, etc. So there's conversation that I'm pretty sure that they're hearing and, general feeling that they're sensing. How do we as parents kind of address the emotional concerns or feelings that a child might have, and at different ages, because as a young child you may still kind of be sensitive to your parents moods but not being able to communicate, whereas an older child may be able to communicate a little bit clearer.
It's important to keep the information as minimal as possible, because what happens is, if we go into the details, then the
Yeah.
child is just hearing words and they're forgetting the essence. They're not able to follow. So just, talk to them about how there's a virus going on and that it's safe to be at home. And that's the safest place to be for everybody, to be at home, and for us to just keep washing our hands and that we can keep ourselves safe. And then when it comes to the emotional concerns, just tell them, this is how we can keep ourselves safe, and you don't need to worry because I will also be there to keep you safe.
Yeah.
I will do everything I can to keep you safe. And also, invite them to tell you, so how are you feeling? And hear it out, and then, maybe direct it into an activity. You can say, okay, so should we draw out our feelings? What should we do with our feelings? How do you want to play out our feelings?
All
Give
right.
them.
Yeah, that was really, really great. And I think, again, incredibly useful advice and information. I don't think we have any more questions, and I'm not going to keep you much longer. It's pretty late for you as well. So thank you so much, Anya, for having taken your time out and for
My
having
pleasure. Thank
had
you too.
a wonderful conversation with us. Thank you so much.
Thank you so much. Bye. Good night.
Bye.